welcome to The T. I'm your host, DeFi Dave. This is a very special first episode of The T, and we have on my good friend, MouseDev. MouseDev, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, MouseDev is honestly an enigma. He's a legend in himself. Like, it's really funny because like we originally met a few months ago, and then you were like, telling me these stories. I'm like, wow, you've really been in the trenches on chain, on like you've really traversed the dark forest, and went into all the random alleyways and random nooks and crannies that exist on chain.
Yeah, I was always like interested when so many people were like, you have to check the chain, and I'm like, checking the chain. Like I thought this is like, thought we like used the chain. I thought that's just that's the normalcy, but
yeah,
I don't know. I guess not.
So yeah, it was just like, I mean, it's hard to conceptualize checking the chain because that doesn't really, you can't really check the chain in, the world off chain. It's just there. It's just databases that are closed.
Yeah.
But with like Ethereum, it's like, oh, you can actually see what's going on.
Yeah, so, a lot of people use like front end representations of the chain as opposed to like actually like looking at the chain itself. Which I guess I just look at it through Etherscan, so maybe I'm a fraud, but like.
I mean, Etherscan is like you need, in order to check the chain, you need tools. So like,
yeah.
I mean, unless you can like read the fucking like
the bytecode
the bytecode itself. Unless you're
absolute wizard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but
I bet T11s could do it.
Yeah, probably. So when was your first? Like, how long did it take when you started checking the chain? Like, how long did it take for you to get comfortable with checking the chain?
Yeah, so I've been a developer for a good while now, like many years. So I have like a general developer sense, but ETH is so dramatically different from other ways of coding because it's like it exists like most servers exist. If you consider like a smart contract a server, except everything's like fully open source. So like you can actually just read all the code that's ever been put on Ethereum. You can just like read it, which is sort of a wild. It's like very hard to grasp. So I don't know. The very first project that I had was Anon Mice, and that was sort of a display in checking the chain because I actually had no front end. There was no website, and we had no servers at all. When we launched it, we simply deployed the contract. Like that was it, and then we went into like the CryptoPunks chat, and we're like, just use this contract, and like it's fully on chain, like all the images and metadata are on chain, and so like I don't know, I kind of use that moment to like force everyone else to like use the chain instead of like having people use my front end and then get mad and at my front end if it doesn't work. I was like, just use the chain, it won't fail.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of MySpace back in the 2000s when if you wanted a cool profile, you had to learn HTML to make it, and it forced everyone to learn to code. And so, like with anonymized, like definitely different. Like it forced everyone to check the chain. Check the contract and use the contract. This actually reminds me of. Do you remember I'm sure you remember Mooncats. Of course, that was the first time I actually went into Etherscan and went straight to the contract to get some Mooncats, and that was just so much fun. Like that was a crazy. So did Anonymize happen before or after Mooncats? Were you inspired by Mooncats, or was it just a random thing?
I was inspired by many things. CryptoPunks obviously the main inspiration. Nonce was a big inspiration. Mooncats surprisingly is not on chain. I don't know if you actually know that.
No.
There's a lot of people say a lot of things, and unless you check the chain, you don't. you not often are they sort of like checked. So Mooncats they just hashed their script. So they have like a sort of a regeneration script if you have a seed. So all the seeds for your Mooncats are on chain, and this is foggy knowledge, but it's somewhere around the truth. Your seed is stored on chain, but the script is simply hashed, and the hash of the script is on chain. You'd have to find a repository of the script somewhere off chain, hash it, ensure its validity, and then you can regenerate it using that script off chain. But nowhere on chain are the actual Mooncats rendered. Right? They're actually rendered in a script somewhere off chain in a JS script. Right?
Okay.
Mice are actually rendered in ETH on the smart contract. When you read token UI, it actually renders your mouse. So like Nouns. Like Nouns is actually fully on chain. Artblocks is not fully on chain. Like it is. There's a large semantical debate about what on chain really means, and there's like levels to it, right? So Mooncats is decidedly not on chain. You could not re-render it, and you could not regenerate it. with the data that's on the chain. Art blocks you could, they like store their scripts on chain, but you'd have to like pull their scripts off chain, run them, and generate your art. So like I don't know, it's a big sort of a big argument in the
Hmm.
like in my niche, or like the niche that I'm in of the NFT community, because we're not actually a part of the broader NFT community, fortunately. Sort of have our own little niche.
Do you hold ETH but don't know what to do with it? Want to earn those juicy liquid staking derivative yields but don't know where to start? Well, FrxETH is there for you. FrxETH is Frax's native LSD solution, allowing you to earn boosted yields in multiple ways on your ETH. If you want to get started, go to app.frax.finance and turn your ETH into FrxETH today. Okay, MouseDev, you mentioned the broader NFT community. I want to hash on that point, no pun intended. Can you just discuss and talk about the broader NFT community? Like,
Yeah.
what's it like, being a dev in the NFT community? Because it's kind of foreign to me being in DeFi land.
Yes, there's like there's multiple crowds.
Hmm.
You have like your art enjoyers who sort of respect NFTs for just being digital artifacts and
Hmm.
sort of like assets that you can just own on chain. You have your speculators, and then sort of your like I don't know, like your developers are a much smaller group. The speculators are a very large group, maybe like 75 to 90%.
Hmm.
Your art enjoyers are like maybe 10 to 25%. I could be wrong. Then developers are like an even smaller niche, I guess, if that makes sense. Most NFTs are not as technical
Hmm.
as DeFi generally is, because DeFi has tons of like wizard like math, tons of like I don't know, protocol, esoteric information that sort of surrounds them. Um, but yeah, because most NFTs they rely on sentimental value rather than like maybe technical value, which is where like it differs from DeFi, because a new DeFi protocol doesn't really have sentimental value. It just matters. I don't know what the code that underlies it are, what the financial concepts that underlies them are. But art is just art. It's like, what is the NFTC? And then like maybe the brand of the artist that makes it. There's a lot of factors that goes into like I don't know what makes an NFT an NFT.
Yeah, I can see the parallel with DeFi and with tokens, to be honest, because you have like devs are obviously the smallest percentage. The vast majority of people are speculators. And then you have, 10%, which are the long term believers. With NFTs, it's like, they're in it for the aesthetic. For DeFi, they believe in what the project is doing.
Yeah, and like you really shouldn't. I think people often have a misnomer of thinking that NFTs are valuable because they're NFTs. Um, it's like saying a certain piece of art is valuable because of the canvas it was drawn on. And
Mm.
so it's kind of this backwards way of thinking that has led us to this area we are now, where we have sort of an existential threat, because obviously, let's say like canvas paintings aren't going to be worth infinite money forever. That's just ludicrous, right? It matters what the painting is, and all that NFTs allow you to do as a substrate is just to now have digital assets. You couldn't have digital assets before this that were actually transferable. You really could just right click save it, and you'd have no idea who the like quote unquote owner is. But now you have like the provenance of like an artist. I don't know, like people like makes a piece of art. You can actually know that like that was the one that you own, and ownership is important in a certain context, because like if you were to go up to anyone and ask them if they want the real Mona Lisa or the print of a Mona Lisa, they would always choose the real Mona Lisa. Well,
Hmm.
that's, most people would like, that's dumb. Why would you care? They're the same thing. Well, clearly, actually owning the real, authentic piece is an important thing to human nature. And so this just allows us to have like verifiable ownership of something uh, in a digital manner. And so we're sort of moving past the point where NFTs are valuable. That's sort of like, that shouldn't happen, right?
Yeah,
Maybe if this piece of art is an NFT, it's valuable because the art is valuable, not
valuable.
not because and while the industry sort of keeps this uh, sort of idiotic idea that just because something is an NFT, you should have it, it's not going to be successful, and we're going to face these sort of constant existential threats and these pump and dumps that we sort of constantly see.
Yeah, we're afflicted with it in DeFi land as well. And when it comes to digital art, from your observations, what makes digital art valuable? Like whether it's a one of one, maybe like a short collection, like a small collection, or a PFP collection. I'm sure there's
It, it,
difference. Yeah.
it would be exactly the same as traditional art. It's
Mm.
entirely brand,
It's
right?
all brand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like if you imagine this, for example, I think about this a lot. If you got, there are, this isn't meant to be like a diss on artists, but there are good artists all over the world. There are millions of extremely talented artists that could draw something that could blow your mind.
Hmm.
So one inherent piece of art that's just high quality is not inherently valuable. It's just not, right? So just because someone says the art
Just
for
selling
NFT
it how
is
it
good,
is.
that doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I could go to Fiverr and contract someone to draw me a character that looks even better than most of these characters for $5, right? So it's like if you had an artist draw 10,000 different apes on a piece of paper, and then you try to sell each of those apes for $200 in the real world, you would miserably fail. Not even one of them would be purchased, right? No one's gonna, some random artist. People can't sell their good art every day. If you go to like the thrift store, there's like incredible art there that's for $20, right? Um, so we got this weird idea in our head that just because it's digital, it's valuable.
But just
And
because
so
it's good, it's valuable. That's even another step back.
all that matters is the brand,
The
right?
brand.
All that
Yeah.
matters is that it's Beeple that made it, or it's Picasso that made it, or it's Van Gogh that made it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is that we haven't had digital assets be provable until like a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years. Actually, it was like maybe
2
7
years
years
ago.
ago.
Oh, 70,
Yeah,
oh,
like
2 years
6 years
ago.
ago when ERC 721 came out. So we haven't actually had, like, we've had traditional art forever, right? So there are millions of traditional artists. But when we eventually accept digital art or digital assets as another form of like actual assets, you'll have artists grow brands and grow capacity. But all that NFTs need to serve as is like a carrier for art that's digital. You still need to make art desirable and have your brand desirable as the art
Mm-hmm.
itself, right? Like, so it all depends on the brand.
Yeah, so when it comes to digital art, there's obviously a variety of factors that have to be considered, especially considering that it's on chain. You know, you sent last night we were talking, and you were sending me all these threads about these rescue missions you had to do, whether it was like a mint gone astray or a bug here and this there. Like, what are some things that artists and collections don't consider when they release their digital art to the wild?
Traditional or digitally, you mean?
Digital.
Yeah, they never hire good enough developers. They always hire the cheapest developers. Um, it happens every other day, right? Like it's
Hmm.
just I've sort of stopped caring at this point, and I've sort of lost hope. And it sort of just proves that people are in it for like the mint funds, right? They
Yeah,
really
short
don't.
term. Yeah,
They don't. Well, they don't respect the chain,
they
right?
don't respect the chain.
You have to respect it.
You have to respect the chain.
You have to respect the immutability and like the sort of like immovable object that is the chain. You can't just like stop it and make an adjustment to it in the middle of its movement. It's just done. Once you deploy it, it's done. You can't just change it, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of people have felt a lot of pain because they've decided to pay Fiverr developers
Mm.
to write their code because they're like, it's just a smart contract. We're not going to pay this developer this much money. We're going to do it cheaply. It doesn't matter.
And then they really feel, like you said, they really feel the weight of immutability, which is
It's
infinite gravity. You can't go back in time. That's the weight of it.
that feeling. I felt that feeling before. It's a very bad one. Once you like, you're faced with a bug and you're like, all right, let's fix it, and then it's like, wait, I cannot. I have to just sit here as it happens, right?
Yeah, and you just like watch it unfold on chain, and there's just nothing you can do. I'm sure a lot of
There's
devs can feel your pain right now. I've seen situations where there was certain vulnerabilities, and it's a war room situation. It's not fun. Like you never want to be in it, and
oh
that's
my!
what.
I've been in so many, dude.
So let's go into like some war stories then.
Oh, dude, it's bad, man.
Yeah,
It's not anything I'd wish on anyone.
let's go. I want to go into the Kuwami mint rescue. That
Yeah,
one
yeah,
was
yeah.
interesting. Can you like give some context to that and like what happened down there?
Which one? There were two of them.
The one with the 2.5K. That was the one where you had to make where you basically deployed.
Right.
Let me try to rehash this. So on testnet, there was like some mix up and like people sent their funds to a smart contract that didn't exist yet. But then you had to figure out, okay, the nonce hasn't been reached on mainnet, so you deployed some custom code so it reached that nonce, and then it was able to deploy that smart contract that happened to have the funds in it, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
pretty good for
yeah,
someone who's not a dev.
that's actually pretty much exact thing. So I had deployed the initial Kuwami contract to testnet very first of all on Rinkeby.
Rip
And then
Rinkeby.
rest in peace Rinkeby.
Yeah.
And then we had connected that to our front end to do testing. And this is another distinction that people often don't understand between a back end, like a contract, and a front end developers. Like their jobs don't align necessarily. So the front end dev that was doing this, the site was live for people to access, but the address still pointed to the testnet address, but it was still on mainnet. People had it on mainnet because they didn't the dev didn't enforce that your current chain ID was equal to whatever chain ID was specified there. So you can all addresses always exist at all time. There's no like you don't ever make an account. You just discover the keys to it.
You
And with
don't ever.
contracts,
That's so fascinating.
you never actually create anything. It's all just like discovered. And contract addresses are just a slight difference of that. So they're simply like a hash of the message sender and the nonce when you deploy a contract without create2. Create2 is another, it's like a low level thing, but that's sort of aside what we're talking about right now. So like when I deploy a contract, so every time you do a transaction on Ethereum, you have a nonce. Every transaction you do it increments by 1. So your very first transaction is like 1 or 0, I don't remember. But let's say it's like nonce 100 and you have address DeFi Dave. It would hash those together, and that's simply the address of the contract. And no one can ever redeploy code to that address because they wouldn't be able to result in the same hash, right? There's 2 to the 256th results, possibilities. It's the same underlying thing that, it underlies all cryptography, right? And so on testnet, I had an address that I had.
Wait, can you go back and talk about for people that aren't sure? So you have like the nonce, I understand, the message sender. So like for an EOA, like the message sender would be DeFi Dave, but for the smart contract, like that hasn't been discovered yet. Am I getting that
the
right?
message sender is always the deployer.
Oh, the message sender is always the deployer. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the message sender is the person that's actually creating the contract combined with the nonce, their current network nonce.
Oh, so like the current network nonce and the message sender together create the smart contract. Well, discover the smart contract, I mean.
Yeah, well, they deploy so that one's a bit different because it actually just like creates the rules where it's like someone could find the keys to a smart contract address, right? But they may as well just hack the null address or Vitalik's address, right? Like they're all of equal like possibility, I guess.
Okay, I got it. So what happened? Continue.
Oh yeah, so like I took my testnet address that I had deployed with, and the contract was deployed on like nonce 30. So the address combined with nonce 30 would create that same address. Then I went on mainnet and I did 29 dummy transactions to increment my nonce all the way up to 30. And then I made a custom contract that just took whatever the contract's balance was and sent it to myself. And then I deployed that on the 30th nonce and then executed it and then pulled all the money from the contract.
Wow, that must have been
if I would have messed it up, it would have just been all gone.
You have to be a brain surgeon with that kind of precision.
It was very scary, yeah.
Yeah. But that was only, 2.5K. There was another one that happened with the same
man.
where it was 50K that you retrieved. And this was really interesting because it had,
it wasn't my fault.
It wasn't your fault. Let's make that clear, everyone. It wasn't MouseDev's fault.
But so the contract actually would have worked anyways. Because of the fact that I could pull the 50K, I could have pulled the 2+ million that was in there for the actual sale. But I didn't want to risk it, and instead I had deployed the first version, which is the one with the 50K. Someone alerted me via DMs that they weren't certain if using the method I used it would actually work. Given that one of the receive addresses was a Gnosis safe. So I redeployed it with a slight fix. But for some reason, people still minted. Actually, I think the website may have pointed towards the old one. Or people minted on the old one. They still used the old contract and tried to mint the tokens. So yeah, I had to pull the money out of that one then eventually and just send it back to the people because we had the official one that was deployed later. And I can go into depth on how that works if you want.
Yes, please.
So on ETH, there are EIPs. Ethereum Improvement Proposals or something. EIP 2929 stated that the dot transfer method, if you want to actually use that very specific Solidity method, it was hard coded to I'm sort of just spitballing, let's say 3200 gas, right? Normally, to transfer ETH inside of that instance, it was maybe 3200 exactly. To transfer to just an address, right? So it was fine. But the thing is Gnosis safes are contracts. They're not
So it's
EOAs.
higher.
Right? They do some custom code on the reception of ETH, which means it does more, data on chain, which means it needs more gas. But then the transaction will always run out of gas because it uses 3600 and this is limited to 3200. Right? So it'll always hit the 3200 and the entire TX will revert. You can actually go to that contract and see my first 8 failed attempts at pulling the money out. Eventually I succeeded, but I had 8 attempts where I failed each time.
Yeah.
And so given that, they released EIP 2930, which I'm not super clear on it, but what it allowed you to do was like warm up certain slots of a contract by interacting with them beforehand. And then when you interact with them again, they're like considered warm, so they use less gas to interact with. So essentially,
you're like warming up a fire. You're heating it up. You're like, we're getting the gas.
Yeah. So then when I went to actually do the transfer, it didn't cost the cold amount of 3600, and it was under the 3200 limit, and everything went through just fine. And I could have. It's called like access control list, and you specify what contract and what slot you want to access. And then when you access that again, it'll do that. And anyone that ever interacts with a Gnosis safe using a dot transfer method inside of a contract will have to use this. But I don't know how prevalent that actually is on chain right now. It's sort of interesting that that's just sort of something that was introduced in 2929, but
yeah,
it's how it be.
How it be, and it do.
It'd be like that. So yeah, I pulled the 50K out, and then we sent it back to all the people. And then went along our merry way.
And I feel like every story we're leading up to a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And now one of your more recent threads was about Jack Butcher's checkmarks and future commits, which I found really interesting because going back to the beginning of the conversation, we talked about like everything on chain with this, forced randomness concept and everything's on chain, it really makes it very interesting. Can you go into this?
Yeah, so I've been friends with Jalil for a while, and he was working on Jack Butcher's. Did you hear of Check? Yeah, he was working on Jack Butcher's Checks project.
I was like a fan of Jack Butcher even before he was in NFTs.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, same. And so
I actually have the WAGME tattoo of his WAGME artwork on my ankle. Bro. Yeah.
Well, so, you got commitment. Let us see it.
Fuck.
Just send a photo on Twitter later.
Wait. All right. You know what?
Yeah, let us see.
It's on Twitter. I don't want to put in that much effort.
Just post it on Twitter.
Yeah, I was saying, you can tell the story. Then I have a follow-up question.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I contacted Jalil because we've been friends for a while, asking if I could just like check through the checks contract because I just wanted to make sure it all went smoothly. And so he said yes, and I started checking it out, and not to like call them out or anything. They're like all great, but their initial contract had pseudo random generation at mint time. So what they would do is they would hash like message sender, block timestamp, a bunch of data that's just evident at the time of mint.
Oh, so right? it could be like gamed and stuff, basically.
Yeah, I can go over exactly how someone would do it. I've actually written this before for like the Wolf game and stuff like that. And so so the issue with that, because that then seeded the randomness for all tokens, right? Well, on a per token basis. So you would, call mint, it would hash a bunch of data together, and then that data would be used to decide what check you got. But the issue with a project like Jack Butcher's checks is that the floor is already 1 to 2 ETH. And some of the percentage chances for rares, that's all that matters. Aesthetics don't matter. All that matters to NFT consumers, for some reason, is the rarity chance of it. There's like a slight aesthetic thing. If it's completely useless, but there's a percent chance they don't care as much. But these would be like aesthetics combined with chance, right? So say there's like a 2% chance a rare one happens. That's going to be worth like 4 ETH, right? So if someone can just buy 10 blank checks, mint 10 extremely rare ones, they'll dump on everyone's heads, and everyone's going to be in like a panic.
Yeah, that's right for everyone. Yeah.
And so what they would do, I can go over really quickly how they would exploit it. Is do you have Flashbots?
Yeah.
So they would make a Flashbots bundle and an external contract. And they would make an external contract that copies the exact code that's used by checks to derive the randomness, duplicate it, and then run it every time, and then simply add a check afterwards to see if that number, given the derivations and like modulos of checks like randomness decisions would result in a rare one. If it wouldn't, that contract would revert. On its own, that doesn't really matter. But what you do is you have a Flashbots bundle where one transaction simply mints you the check, the other calls to see if in that context the randomness is good enough, right? But with Flashbots, what you can say is if any of these transactions into this bundle reverts, don't push the transaction on chain. Don't push the bundle on chain, right? They simulate it. And so you would simply just run the bundle if you would get a poor looking check revert and nothing happens, right? And they just do that over and over again. Or you could even go so far as to
So
generate
this is what like
infinite addresses.
this is what like people trying to game systems do. They do this like MEV bundle. This one weird trick to get a rare NFT.
Yeah. Well, if the NFT metadata is on chain.
Okay. If it's on chain. Okay.
Yeah. And so then you just keep doing it over and over again. And the issue with Jack Butcher's checks, not an issue, but one of the designs is that it's infinite.
Oh, so they could just keep doing it and keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not like this doesn't like just work for a week. And then after a week you can't, because it was migrating from the Zora editions, right?
Mm-hmm.
The initial $8 checks were being migrated on chain. And so that was happening forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could just buy them and then you have infinite time to figure out how to do it. So I told them that wasn't going to work. And I sort of designed this system that I'd been wanting to do for a while where you do commit reveal, right? That's a common concept. Wizards and Dragons did it, but it's very UX poor because what you have to do if you want 10 things is you have to do 20 transactions now. You have to do 10 to mint them, let's say. Or I guess you could say one transaction to mint all 10, but then you need to do an individual reveal for each one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I made was this like epoch-based reveal mechanism. Is like if I commit on block 0, I now have an unrevealed check and it burns my old one, right? It's not revealed though, it has no metadata.
Mm-hmm.
And I say block 5 will be the randomness that I choose to use to decide this. Well, anyone else that also commits between 0 and 5 theoretically should also just use that same randomness. There's no reason not to. There's no reason to make them use a different block or for them to resolve it on their own, right? If someone resolves block 5, anyone that wants the randomness from block 5 just has it stored once for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you commit on block 1, 2, 3, once block 5 comes, it simply stores the epoch 2 randomness, right? So like epoch 1 has randomness like data like 3, 4, 5 or something, and then in all your checks data, one by one, they store what epoch they're referencing, right? And then on the render of the token, it simply grabs the randomness from the registry and then renders it. And what it allows you to do is it allows to be infinite or an arbitrary number of tokens in one epoch with one reveal transaction, right? So 100 tokens could be revealed in one transaction, and it's O of 1 notation. Do you know like big O notation?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't scale with the fact that there's 100 of them. Like you could do 1 or you could do 10,000, and it'll be the same gas cost to reveal all of them.
Okay, I got it.
I go over more depth than that in the
thread.
Yeah.
And so if I had to, like, I'm trying to let it marinate and sit in my head for a bit. So with what you're doing, I'm confused. I'll admit.
Which part? I'll explain.
So okay, so you have like the 0 to 5 epoch on chain, and then like it takes like the randomness from there and does something else, and from there you get an arbitrary number, and that arbitrary number you get your check mark. And
so epoch 1 is marked as having the randomness from block 5.
Okay.
Until block 5 is reached, everyone commits to using epoch 1.
Okay.
Infinite numbers of people can fit their transaction. Well, not yeah.
A
ton of people.
Okay,
and then epoch 2 happens, and that's block 10.
Oh, so okay. If
an arbitrary number of people can fit in between the epochs up to an epoch. Okay, so now there's like
I get it. So before this, you can just imagine the mint as just like one giant epoch, but like with your method, like each epoch is like a different set of randomness.
Yes, and it's not at the time of minting.
Okay, it's at the time.
You need to do a transaction 10 minutes in the future that stores a piece of data, and so then when my token renders, it says like, has my epoch been resolved? And if it has, use the randomness for my epoch.
Oh, so like you don't even get your check mark like after you mint it. You have to do like another transaction.
You get your check mark, but it looks like nothing. It looks unrevealed.
It's looks unrevealed, and then it's like you do another transaction, and that's when it's revealed.
Yes.
And
But
but
anyone, so anyone else that's minting them also gets revealed.
oh, so like if like a bunch of people, let's say like 100 people for Epoch 1 to block 5, they mint. If one and then okay, everybody after everyone wins. So if one person reveals, then they all reveal.
Everyone reveals immediately.
Everyone reveals once one person like
Yes.
reveals. Okay.
Once that randomness has been stored, now all 100 of those tokens reference it. And now
Oh,
Epoch 1 starts. Epoch 2 starts
Epoch
for
2
all the other
starts.
people. But Epoch 2 is in 10 minutes. It just, you can enter it now.
Oh, so it's like, and then it's like the next epoch. Then like let's say like 500 people go in, they mint check marks, and then it's over.
They're unrevealed until
Unre-
one person.
so one person doesn't matter if it's like 10 people in one epoch or 1,000 people.
It
If
doesn't matter.
one
But the same
person,
cost for that one person.
same cost for that one person, and okay, so this is just like different levels of randomness. You just try and make
Yes. But this is not exploitable by flashbots anymore, right? Because you don't know what the data that you're going to be assigned is at the time of you committing to burning your old one and minting your new one,
hmm
right?
This is
And when
really
someone reveals, they force you to use the randomness that's been revealed.
real. Yeah, because one person revealing it means everybody in that epoch reveals.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's nothing, but so then there's another thing you could say, well, what if I commit on the block that it's revealed at? Let's say it is block 5 and I know the block hash for block 5
Mm-hmm.
and I'm committing then. Well, then it just kicks you to the next epoch.
Oh, it's just like
You reveal it for everyone else, and then it commits you to the
the
next
next
epoch
epoch.
and starts the next. You were actually the one who revealed everyone. You didn't even notice. So I made a function that just decides all of this, does all the actions, commits, reveals, extends,
hmm
and it's just called once every time a mint happens.
Okay, okay now I understand it. What are some other use cases for this randomness? You think?
I can't think of any in DeFi. It's just anything where you need to have something that's just not one to one, like not a decision that's known.
Okay.
You need any sort of randomness, like a lottery maybe, or like I don't know.
Mm.
Yes, just anytime a chance occurs on chain, you could use this. But there is a bug with this actually, and I wrote a second thread about this. But that's like much. I fixed it. If we
Yeah.
want to go into that, but that's like
Uh,
that gets much more
yeah.
technical.
Oh, we don't have to go into that right now.
Okay,
I
yeah.
just wanted. We're gonna wrap up soon, and one thing I wanted to talk about was well, you're a quote unquote a caveman to DeFi.
I am.
And I'm curious, like I have a few questions. Like, what do you think is holding you back from DeFi? Are you just uninterested in it? Are you intimidated by it? Do you not find it useful?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, and maybe my opinion helps as like an outsider.
hmm
Everyone's interested in making more money, right? No one's against making more money, but as we saw with like I don't know the food swaps, whatever they were called,
Food coins.
yeah, food coins with shit tons of APR. That's really scary to normies because we don't have financial literacy in the aspect of like complex financial topics. I have financial literacy in that like I don't spend too much money and I save my money, but I don't understand complex financial ideas, right? Lending, borrowing,
Risk.
options, risk, but the more complex things, right? Not just like saving my money or spending it. Most people, financial literacy to them means just like saving your money.
hmm
But this is a whole different thing where it actually goes into like things you need a degree to know or that you actually have to study, right?
Study
To
a
understand
very
the risks
expensive
of them.
leadership. I mean, very expensive experience.
Yeah, if you do it wrong, you lose tons of money, right? And it's not worth for most people the risk versus how much time they'd have to take to understand the risk,
hmm
right? Because a lot of DeFi seems to be Ponzi's people on the outside, which is like fine, but you need to understand. Well, it's not fine. I don't know if the U.S. government is saying it's not fine, but you need to understand it, right?
Yeah.
You need to have an understanding of what's happening, and a lot of people like they don't want to just like they don't want to have to study a protocol if you're not like an avid DeFi user, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, that makes
And
that
like
makes 100%
I'm like a
sense.
developer.
hmm
I'm not a financial advisor, so like I don't want to put my money into something that I don't actually know how it works. As we've seen with like FTX, even though yes, that's CeFi. I totally like it's not DeFi,
hmm
but it sort of like if you don't understand something, you shouldn't put a lot of your money into it, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, what we saw with Luna and UST, like
Yeah,
it was like written out in the white paper, and still you had like billion-dollar
that
funds.
was like you'd consider that DeFi, right? But it was
Yeah,
just a poor mechanism.
yeah.
But it was still a mechanism that was DeFi. You just had to understand it to know that it was going to wreck you eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But it did work for a while, and it gave you sizable returns. And so a lot of people are just conditioned to no longer, like, I feel like, listen to it gives you a lot of money back.
Yeah,
And they just want to know, like, they're gonna be like, all right, well, I'm not gonna just put my money into it. I have to understand it, but I'm not gonna like spend all the time it takes me to understand it.
So this
if that makes sense.
It does.
I love DeFi. I'm very interested in it, and I will get into it. Yes, but like before I put my money into it, I want to have a very deep knowledge of how everything actually works.
So when it comes to cross-pollination between, DeFi and NFT communities and just crypto native individuals in general, what would you say for that? What would you say would get us there? Like, would you say more education, more safety checks, better messaging?
Yeah, simpler education and like easier ideas, or sort of uh, like blessings from people that people trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like a lot of finance can be boiled down to very simple analogies,
Mm-hmm.
right? I give money to this person, they do this and they do that, right? Making it more transparent and understanding where the yield actually comes from, and understanding that if you don't know where the yield comes from, you are the yield.
If you don't understand where the yield comes from, you are the yield.
Yeah. If
Yep.
you don't know the yield, you're the yield. The
Yeah.
age-old adage of DeFi, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, showing people that, like, you aren't the yield and maybe an actual use case is the yield, and, like, generating just a simple explanation of why someone should use this and, like, what returns they actually should expect, what the risks, like, and very plainly say what the risks are. Like, with, like, LPing. Is it even decided if long-term LPing is profitable? Like,
most of the time, it's not.
exactly.
I mean,
but you wouldn't expect that on its head.
Yeah, especially with Uniswap V3.
Yeah, you would like
Uniswap V3 is built for active management.
I mean, most normies aren't.
Yeah,
like,
they just want to set and forget. Most people, including myself, they just want to like put their like dollars or stablecoins somewhere,
exactly.
have it grow, let it sit, and move on.
And a lot of things that are in DeFi aren't like that. Like with LPing, you have to know the risk of impermanent loss, and someone has to tell you, like, all right, well, if one of your assets wildly swings in price and the other doesn't, you're gonna lose a lot of value. That's impermanent loss, right? Like that's like people don't even know that though. People just like I had a friend that just like put a bunch of money in LPs and he was like, all right, I'm taking this out. But it sounded like a good idea. But like then something happened that was perfectly normal. That was the known of risk, but like it wasn't really purported to him. He didn't really know, and he's not a quant.
Yeah,
he's not calculating these things in real time.
Most people
and
aren't.
so
Yeah,
like things just need to be made that make it much easier to do things, and then have ratings of like I don't know, like a unified rating system of risk to reward, and then a detailed explanation of why the risks happen.
Yeah.
Right. So people know, like, all right, well, I'm LPing right now, whatever that means. And if one of these tokens massively swings in price, I'll lose money. So at least I know that now.
Like
so
its own Moody's, their own credit rating system.
Yeah. So we have like a way that's saying like this is what the clear risk is and this is the reward is. So like the lower the risk, the lower reward, the higher the risk, the higher the reward. But at least you like know what's happening and you're not just like dumping money into a protocol hoping that it grows, which is sort of what DeFi is for the uneducated user right now.
Yeah. Yeah. We still definitely have a long way to go with DeFi, but
it's very promising.
Extremely promising to like.
I love Aave. Like that's a great idea.
You should check out Fraxlend. You'll love Fraxlend.
I absolutely will. Yes, I'm very interested in that.
I guess I'll give it like a little bit of. It's my favorite primitive of the Frax family of primitives. So it's actually it took a lot of inspiration from. Are you familiar with Kashi from Sushi?
No.
So how Aave works is it's pooled funds. I'm not sure if the V3 is updated, but V2 was pooled funds. How Kashi is it was siloed pools. And so it was you only like liquidity was only for that one pair. So Fraxlend is built like that. So it basically has a bunch of assets you could use as collateral, like whether it's CRV, CVX, FXS. Like it's just added Ape actually. So like if any Ape holders are there, you can now use it as collateral, and you can lend and borrow. You can lend your Frax, Or if you have this collateral asset, you can borrow Frax, against your asset. So it's very straightforward, and it's a very easy way to either utilize Frax if you just have it just sitting around, or if you want to like put if you want to like be taking out loans against your collateral, like there's a way to do that now with Fraxlend. It's real. I think it's a very elegant system, and I really like the whole idea of it being siloed because it makes it a lot safer. Because if one pair is unhealthy, that doesn't affect the rest of the pairs.
Nice, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but that is my Fraxlend shill of the evening.
Nice, yeah.
But anyways, we're gonna wrap this up. I'd like to make these. This is brand new. I'd like to make it like quicker than our usual programming. But MouseDev, thanks so much for coming on. Where could people find you online?
Just at _MouseDev on Twitter is where I reside mostly. That's pretty much it, to be honest.
MouseDev on the hunt on chain for the cheese through the dark forest.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
See you.
Yep. Adios.
One sec. Everything said on this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.